Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the private bedchambers of the most powerful people in history. But we're not here to witness their moments of triumph or their acts of statecraft. We're here to watch them in their final, most human, and often most miserable moments. Tonight's story is about the great equalizer, the one enemy that no king, no conqueror, no genius has ever been able to defeat disease. We're going to explore the last days of some of history's most famous figures and see how their immense power and influence was often useless against the quiet, microscopic tyrants that live in our own blood and in our own air. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived their medical treatments, let alone their diseases. Forget the fever. The state-of-the-art care for a dying king in the 17th century might have involved bleeding, purging, blistering plasters, and a final, desperate prescription of powdered human skull. The cures were often a horror show all by themselves, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet and simple way to support the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always a little fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is one of sweat, of dust, and of the unshakable. Godlike certainty of your king. You are a general in the Macedonian army, one of the trusted companions of Alexander the Great. The year is 323 BC. You are not in Greece or in Persia, or in any of the lands you have conquered. You are in the hot, ancient, and magnificent city of Babylon, the new capital of a new world that you and your king have forged with the points of your spears. You are a man who has seen a living god at work. You have stood with Alexander at the Battle of Gaugamela, where you shattered the armies of the great Persian king. You have followed him across the deserts of Gedrosia, through the snows of the Hindu Kush, to the banks of the Indus River at the very edge of the known world. You have seen him charge into the thick of battle, his golden hair a beacon of impossible courage. He has been wounded many times, but he has always seemed invincible. More than a man, a true son of Zeus. And now, at the age of just 32, he is the undisputed master of the largest empire the world has ever known. He is in Babylon, resting his armies and planning his next, and most ambitious, campaign the conquest of the Arabian Peninsula. He is at the absolute zenith of his power. He seems immortal. Your story begins, as so many tragedies do, at a party. The court in Babylon is a whirl of celebration, of feasting, of drinking. Your king, always a man of immense appetites, throws himself into the revelry with the same ferocious energy he gives to a battle. For 2 weeks, it is an endless series of banquets and long, heavy drinking bouts. After one of these long nights, the king complains of a fever and a chill. At first, no one is worried. You are in Babylon, a city of swamps and canals. In the crushing heat of early summer, fevers are common. Even a king, you reason, is not immune to the bad air of this foreign land. His Greek physicians, the best in the world, attend to him. They prescribe the usual remedies: rest, cooling baths, simple potions of barley water. It is a minor, temporary inconvenience, but the fever does not break. The next day, it is worse. The chills are more violent. The fever is higher. Alexander, the man of boundless, restless energy, is now too weak to leave his bed. He tries to conduct the business of the empire from his chambers. He meets with you and his other generals. His voice a hoarse whisper, his body slick with a feverish sweat. You see a strange, new look in his eyes. Not of fear, not yet, but of a deep, profound, and unfamiliar weariness. As the days pass, the fever tightens its grip. He is consumed by a raging, unquenchable thirst. His body aches with a deep, grinding pain in his bones. He begins to lose his voice, able to communicate only in whispers. The atmosphere in the great palace of Nebuchadnezzar, which had been one of celebration, now becomes one of hushed, fearful anxiety. The best physicians in the world are helpless. They have no name for this sickness. They have no cure. Their entire medical arsenal, their herbs, their potions, their theories of the humors is useless against this simple, brutal fever, and so, in the absence of a rational explanation, the rumors begin, the misinformation. You hear the whispers in the corridors of the palace. The Babylonian priests mutter that Alexander has angered their god, Marduk. They say it is a divine curse. You hear a more sinister rumor spreading among your own Macedonian soldiers. They say the king has been poisoned. They blame the other generals, the ambitious men who are his rivals. They blame his Persian wife. They blame a disaffected courtier. This is the great, unsolved medical mystery of the ancient world, and you are living at the heart of it. What is killing your king? Is it a simple but deadly disease contracted from this unhealthy environment? Is it malaria, carried by the mosquitoes from the nearby swamps? Is it typhoid fever? From contaminated water, is it the cumulative effect of a dozen old battle wounds and a lifetime of hard drinking? Or is it a sophisticated, slow-acting poison? Slipped into his wine cup by an enemy, future historians will debate this question for 2,000 years, and they will never find a certain answer. You, standing at his bedside, only know what you see. You see a god being consumed by an invisible fire. The political situation in the palace becomes as feverish as the king himself. You and the other senior generals, Perdiccas, Ptolemy, Seleucus begin to gather. Your conversations are no longer about the planned invasion of Arabia. They are about the terrifying, unthinkable question: what happens if he dies? Alexander has no clear heir. His wife, Roxana, is pregnant. But the child is not yet born. He has an illegitimate son and a mentally disabled half-brother. But he has no successor. His vast, newly conquered, and deeply unstable empire is held together by a single thing: the force of his own personality, the belief in his own divine invincibility. If he dies, his empire will die with him, shattering into a dozen warring kingdoms. You see your fellow generals, the men you have fought alongside for 20 years, and you see a new look in their eyes. You see the grief for their dying king, but you also see the cold, hard glint of calculation, of ambition. They are no longer his loyal subordinates. They are circling vultures, waiting to pick over the corpse of his empire. The political maneuvering, the secret alliances, the quiet promises have already begun. On the 10th day of his illness, Alexander is so weak he can no longer speak. But he is still the king. The common Macedonian soldiers in his army, who worship him as a god, demand to see him. They fear he is already dead, and that you, the generals, are hiding the truth. A grim, final procession is arranged. The king's bed is moved to a place where the men can see him, and the entire Macedonian army, thousands of them, files silently through the room to pay their last respects. You stand guard as they pass. You see the hard, veteran soldiers, men who have faced down charging war elephants, weeping openly as they look upon the wasted, fever-racked body of their king. He is so weak, he can only acknowledge them with a faint flicker of his eyes. That night, you and the other generals gather around his bed for the last time. He is lucid, but just barely. One of you, some say it was Perdiccas, asks him the Great. Final question: to whom do you leave your empire? Alexander, with his last dying breath, whispers a single, fateful and ambiguous phrase. Toi kratostoi, he says in Greek, to the strongest, and then he is gone. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the world, the man who believed he was a god, is dead. He has not been killed by a Persian arrow or an assassin's knife. He has been defeated by a simple fever, by a microscopic enemy he could not see, in a hot, swampy, and conquered city at the far end of his empire. You stand in the silent, grief-stricken room, and you look at the still warm body of your king, and then you look at the faces of your fellow generals. You see the ambition in their eyes, and you understand the true meaning of his last words. He has not named an heir. He has declared a war between all of you, a war for the prize of his shattered, leaderless world. The fever has not just killed a man. It has just killed an empire, and a new, longer, and even more terrible age of war is about to begin. You leave the hot, decadent, and chaotic world of Babylon, a city whose foundations are shaken by the death of its great conqueror. You travel forward in time, across half a millennium, to a different empire, a different army, and a different kind of emperor. Your world is no longer one of Macedonian spears and the reckless ambition of a young demigod. Your world is one of Roman legions, of disciplined steel, of the cold. Northern winds that blow across the Danube frontier. The year is 180 AD. You are not a general, but a senator, a man of letters and a philosopher, and the man you serve, the man you call your friend, is the emperor of the Roman world, Marcus Aurelius. You are not in the magnificent, marble-clad city of Rome. You are here, in a vast, fortified military camp on the edge of the empire, the camp of Vindobona, which will one day be the great city of Vienna. For nearly a decade, your emperor, a man who loves peace and philosophy, has been forced to be a general, leading the Roman army in a long, brutal, and grinding war against the Germanic tribes of the Marcomanni and the Quadi. Your life in the camp is one of stark contrasts. By day, it is a world of military discipline, the sounds of the legions drilling, the smell of leather and steel, the grim realities of a long and difficult war. But by night, you sit with the emperor in his tent, and it becomes a different world. He is not an emperor, he is a philosopher. You watch as he, by the light of a simple oil lamp, writes in his private journal, the book that will one day be known to the world as the Meditations. You see him grapple with the great questions of Stoic philosophy, of duty, of fate, of how a man can live a virtuous life in a world of pain and chaos. He is not a young conqueror like Alexander. He is an old man now, weary from years of war, his face etched with a deep, philosophical sadness. But he is still the most powerful man in the world, the anchor of the Roman peace, the last of the so-called 5 good emperors. But his long, difficult war has been fought on 2 fronts. One is against the barbarians across the Danube. The other is against an enemy that is already inside your camp, an enemy that has been ravaging your empire for 15 years. It is the great Antonine Plague, the pestilence that the legions brought back from the east, the sickness you witnessed in your last life as a stonemason's apprentice. The plague is a constant, smoldering fire in the crowded, unsanitary conditions of the military camps. It flares up, it dies down, but it is always there, a permanent, grim feature of your life on the frontier. And one cold March evening, the pestilence makes its final, decisive move. It strikes at the very heart of the empire. The emperor, Marcus Aurelius, falls ill. At first, it seems like a simple fever, a consequence of the winter chill and the endless weariness of the long campaign. But the fever does not break. It worsens. The symptoms are familiar, and they are dreaded. It is the plague. You are called to his bedside. You and the other members of his inner circle, his closest friends and advisors. The emperor is weak, his body burning with the fever, but his mind is clear, and it is calm. This is the great, final test of his life's philosophy. He is a man who has spent his entire life preparing for this moment, for the confrontation with his own mortality. And you are a witness to one of the most remarkable and deeply moving deathbed scenes in history. There is no panic. There is no despair. There is only a quiet, stoic, and entirely rational acceptance of the inevitable. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, is about to show the world how a philosopher dies. He knows his own duty. His first concern is not for himself, but for the stability of the empire. He summons his son, the 19-year-old Commodus, to his bedside. Commodus is his father's greatest disappointment. He is a strong, handsome young man, but he is also arrogant, lazy, and obsessed with the gladiatorial games. He has none of his father's discipline, none of his philosophical depth. You look at him, at this sullen, petulant boy who is about to inherit the world, and you feel a profound sense of dread. Marcus Aurelius, with what little strength he has left, gives his son one final lecture on the duties of an emperor. He speaks of justice, of moderation, of the importance of listening to wise counsel. He pleads with his son to see the war through to its final conclusion, to not abandon the frontier. Commodus listens, his face a mask of bored impatience. He is like a boy who is waiting for his father to finish his long, boring speech so that he can go and play with his toys. You have a very bad feeling about the future of the Roman Empire after he has done his duty to the state. Marcus Aurelius turns to his friends. He speaks to you not as an emperor, but as a fellow philosopher. He discusses the nature of death, the impermanence of the body, the freedom of the soul. He treats his own death as a final, interesting philosophical problem to be considered. The army's physicians are present, including the great Galen, who had been his personal doctor. But they are helpless, and they know it. They offer no grand, heroic cures. They do not try to bleed him or to purge him. The emperor's own calm rationality does not allow for such panicked, useless interventions. They offer him sips of cool water. They bathe his forehead. They are no longer doctors. They are simply caregivers, witnesses to a process they cannot alter. He begins to refuse food and water, a final, stoic act of will, a way to hasten the end and to free his soul from its failing physical vessel. On the 7th day of his illness, he calls you and his other friends to his bedside for the last time. He is weak, his voice a bare whisper. His final words are not for himself. They are for the world he is leaving behind. "Weep not for me," he whispers. "Think rather of the pestilence, and of the deaths of so many others." And then he dies. The philosopher-emperor is gone. He has been conquered not by the barbarian hordes he fought for so long, but by the same indiscriminate and miserable plague that has killed millions of his humblest subjects. The grief in the camp is real and profound, but it is quickly overshadowed by the new political reality. The moment the old emperor is dead, the new one begins his reign, and his first act is to betray everything his father stood for. Commodus has no interest in the long, boring war on the frontier. He has no interest in duty or in the stoic virtues. He wants to return to the pleasures and the palaces of Rome. He immediately begins negotiations with the Germanic tribes, granting them a hasty and unfavorable peace. Abandoning the strategic gains that his father had spent a decade of his life fighting and dying for, you stand in the cold, windy camp on the Danube, and you watch as the body of your wise, dead friend is prepared for its long journey back to Rome. And you watch as his foolish, cruel son effectively surrenders the war and prepares for his own. Triumphant return to the city's circuses. This is a moment that future historians will point to as a great and tragic turning point. The death of Marcus Aurelius is the end of the age of the 5 good emperors. It is the end of the Pax Romana. It is the beginning of a long, slow period of decline, of civil war, of unstable and often insane emperors. A crisis that will stretch for the next century. You, standing in that cold tent, are a witness to the hinge of history, and you understand that the Great Plague, the Antonine Plague, has claimed its final and most significant victim. It did not just kill a man, it has killed an age of peace. It has killed a golden age, and it has just handed the entire world over to a fool. Your journey through the history of the great and the dying now takes you from the cold, disciplined, and logical world of a Roman military camp to a place of intrigue, of velvet and secrets, and of a different, more personal kind of power. You travel forward over 1,400 years to the aging, magnificent, and deeply paranoid court of Tudor England. The year is 1603. You are not a senator or a philosopher. You are a woman, a lady in waiting, and your entire world is defined by your proximity to the single, blazing and now fading. Sun at the center of your universe, you are a trusted servant to Her Majesty. Queen Elizabeth I, your world is the royal court, a glittering, whispering, and often treacherous place. It smells of expensive beeswax candles of the sweet, heavy perfume the queen favors to mask the smells of an unwashed age, and of the constant, underlying scent of fear. You are a part of the queen's private household, one of the few women who is permitted into her inner sanctum, her privy chamber. Your job is to attend to her, to help her dress, to read to her, to be a quiet, loyal, and entirely discreet presence. You serve a living legend. She is Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the great Protestant monarch who has ruled England for 45 long and tumultuous years. She is the woman who has faced down the Pope, who has executed her rival, Mary, Queen of Scots, who has defeated the great Spanish Armada. Her will is iron, her intellect is sharp, and her image is a masterpiece of political stagecraft. You are one of the architects of that image. You help her each morning with the long, laborious ritual of her transformation. You help to apply the thick, white mask of Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made of white lead and vinegar that hides the wrinkles and the smallpox scars of her 70 years. You help to place the magnificent, flame-red wig upon her head, covering her own thin, graying hair. You help to dress her in the great, stiff, at jewel-encrusted gowns that project an aura of ageless, almost divine, power. You are helping to maintain a glorious fiction that the Queen is eternal, that she is not subject to the same decay as ordinary mortals, but in the quiet of her private chambers. You see the truth. You see the old, tired, and increasingly frail woman beneath the paint and the pearls, and in the cold. Wet spring of 1603, a new and terrible change begins. The Queen, who has always possessed a fierce and formidable energy, begins to succumb to a strange and profound sickness. It is not a fever. It is not a pestilence. It is a sickness of the spirit. The court physicians, in their reports to the nervous Privy Council, call it a settled and unremovable melancholy. It begins with the death of a close friend, the Countess of Nottingham. The Queen is plunged into a deep, dark, and silent grief from which she cannot, or will not, emerge. She refuses to speak. She refuses to see her ministers. She sits in her rooms at Richmond Palace, staring into the fire, a silent, unmoving monument to her own sorrow. You and the other ladies in waiting try to coax her out of it. You try to read to her from her favorite books. You try to tempt her with her favorite food, but she refuses everything. And then, the melancholy begins to manifest as a physical rebellion against her own body and her own office. She refuses to go to bed. She has a morbid, unshakable conviction that if she allows herself to lie down, she will be admitting defeat, that she will be surrendering to the sickness, that she will never rise again. And so, for days and then for weeks, she stands, or she sits, propped up on a great pile of embroidered cushions that you and the other ladies arrange for her on the floor of her chamber. She remains there, day and night, fully dressed in one of her magnificent gowns. Her eyes open, staring blankly at the tapestries on the wall. She is a queen holding court over her own private, silent, and internal world of memory and grief. The royal physicians are summoned. They are the most learned doctors in the kingdom. They stand in the corner of the queen's chamber, whispering amongst themselves. You hear their diagnoses, their theories based on the ancient wisdom of the humors. They declare that the queen is suffering from an excess of black bile, the humor of melancholy, which has thickened and cooled her blood. They prescribe their remedies, warming cordials, strengthening broths, but the queen refuses to take any of it. She will not eat, she will not drink, and she will certainly not allow her doctors, men she has always distrusted, to practice their foul arts upon her. She is Elizabeth I, Queen of England, and she will not be poked and prodded and purged like a common invalid. The Archbishop of Canterbury comes to offer her spiritual comfort. She is the head of the Church of England. She seems to feel that she does not require religious advice from a subordinate. The situation becomes a quiet, terrible, and unwinnable battle of wills between the dying queen and her helpless, terrified court. The entire government of England is paralyzed. The great unspoken question that has haunted the court for decades now becomes an urgent, terrifying, and immediate crisis: the succession. The queen has no children. She has no direct heir. She has always, with a masterful political cunning, refused to name her successor, using the uncertainty to keep her rivals off balance. But now, that uncertainty threatens to plunge the kingdom into a civil war the moment she dies. You are a witness to the desperate, whispered intrigues of the court. You see the chief minister, Sir Robert Cecil, a small, hunchbacked man of immense intelligence, trying to manage the crisis. You know that he has been in secret correspondence with the Protestant King of Scotland, James VI, the son of the Queen's executed rival, Mary, Queen of Scots. But nothing is certain until the Queen herself gives the word, and the Queen will not speak. Her counselors come to her. They kneel before her on her pile of cushions. They plead with her to name her successor, to ensure a peaceful transition of power. She just stares at them. Her famous black eyes, which once could quell a rebellious courtier with a single glance, are now dull and vacant. You, her lady-in-waiting, have the miserable task of trying to care for her. You and the other ladies must tend to this silent, stubborn, and slowly dying old woman as if she were a difficult child. You try to spoon a little warm broth between her lips. She clenches her jaw shut. You try to make her more comfortable on her cushions. She pushes you away with a surprising, skeletal strength. One of the more obscure and bizarre details of her final days centers on her coronation ring. She has worn it without ever taking it off. For all 45 years of her reign, it has become, her physicians whisper, ingrown into her flesh, and they have a theory that the ring itself is now poisoning her, that it is the source of the melancholy. They finally, after much pleading, persuade her to allow them to file the ring from her finger. The act is a great, painful, and symbolic severing, but it does not cure her. The great historical and medical debate will be a simple one. What actually killed Queen Elizabeth I? Was it a simple, profound, and grief-stricken depression that led her to starve herself to death? Or was there an underlying physical cause? Was it a cancer? Was it a septicemia from a dental abscess? Was it pneumonia? Contracted in the cold? Damp palace. You who are there, who see her profound and unshakable melancholy, suspect that the truth is that she has simply decided to die, that the great and indomitable will that has ruled a kingdom for half a century has now been turned inward in a final, defiant, and successful act of self-destruction after nearly 3 weeks of this terrible silent standoff. Her body finally begins to fail completely. She can no longer stand. You and the other ladies, with the help of her counselors, finally manage to move her from her pile of cushions to her great, canopied bed for her. This is the final surrender. She lies in her bed, and she loses the power of speech. But her mind, it seems, is still there, a prisoner in her failing body. The end comes on a cold, wet night in late March. Her entire Privy Council, the most powerful men in England, are gathered around her bed. The Archbishop of Canterbury is there praying, and you are there. A silent female observer in the corner of the room, a witness to the end of an age. Sir Robert Cecil kneels beside the bed. He must have an answer. He lists the potential candidates for the throne. He asks the Queen to give a sign. "If you would have the King of France to succeed you, Your Majesty," he says, his voice a low, clear whisper. "Show a sign." The Queen lies still, unmoving. "If you would have the King of Scotland to succeed you," he says, his voice trembling slightly. "Show a sign." And then she moves. She slowly, with a great and final effort, lifts her hand from the bedclothes, and she places a single, bony finger on her own head. It is a gesture that some will later interpret as her simply touching her own head. But for the counselors, for the history of England, it is enough. She has made a sign that her successor should be a crowned king. It is a confirmation. It will be James of Scotland. And then she is gone. The great queen is dead. The Tudor dynasty has ended. You look at the small, frail, and suddenly insignificant body of the old woman lying on the great, ornate bed. You think of the magnificent, powerful, almost immortal figure she had once been. And you realize that disease can be more than just a fever or a pestilence. It can be a quiet, creeping sadness, a shadow in the soul. And you have learned that even the most powerful monarch in the world, a woman with the heart and stomach of a king, cannot win a war against the grief and the decay within her own human heart. You leave the quiet, melancholic deathbed of the great Queen Elizabeth, and your journey through time takes you forward. From the end of the Tudor age into the boisterous, witty, and profoundly cynical world of the Restoration. You are no longer in a court of shadows and secrets, but in a world of flamboyant luxury, of scientific curiosity, and of a king who is famous for his love of pleasure. The year is 1685. You are a courtier in the service of King Charles II. You are not a lady-in-waiting in a quiet chamber. You are a gentleman of the court. A man whose life is a dizzying whirl of card games, of witty conversation, of attendance at the new, risque plays, and of navigating the complex and ever-shifting alliances of the royal court at Whitehall Palace. Your king, Charles II, the merry monarch, is a man who seems to be the very embodiment of life and vigor. He is tall, dark, and handsome, a man of immense charm and a famously cynical wit. He is a great patron of the new sciences, the founder of the Royal Society. He is a man who has survived a civil war, the execution of his own father, a long exile, and his triumphant restoration to the throne. He is a survivor, a man who has dedicated his reign to ensuring that he will never have to go on his travels again. He is 54 years old, and he seems to be in robust health, famous for his long, brisk walks and his love of tennis. Your story begins on a cold Monday morning in February. The court is assembled in the king's private apartments for his morning levee, the formal ritual of the king's rising and dressing. It is a crowded public affair. You are there, along with dozens of other dukes, earls, and high officials, all jostling for a position of favor, all hoping for a quiet word with the king. The king is in his chair, a barber attending to his morning shave. The air is filled with the usual courtly chatter. And then, it happens. The king cries out, a strange guttural sound. His eyes roll back in his head. His body is seized by a violent, convulsive fit. He slumps forward in his chair. Insensible. The room is thrown into a state of absolute panicked chaos. The king has had a seizure, an apoplectic fit, and in that moment, the most powerful and modern king in Europe is delivered into the hands of the most learned, most respected, and most catastrophically wrong-headed physicians of his age. You are about to become a first-hand witness to the brutal, systematic, and entirely well-intentioned medical torture of a dying king. The first to act is the king's personal physician, who is present in the room. He does not wait for a diagnosis. He does not wait for his instruments. He uses his own thumbnail, which he keeps sharpened for this very purpose, to make a crude incision in the king's arm, and he begins to bleed him into a chamber pot. This is the beginning of a 4-day-long, non-stop, and heroic assault by the combined medical might of England upon the body of their king. It is a textbook case of 17th century heroic medicine, a philosophy that believed that a violent disease must be met with an equally violent cure. You watch over the next few days as the royal bedchamber is transformed from a place of luxury into a crowded, stinking, and terrible medical battleground. A dozen of the most famous physicians in the kingdom are summoned, and they all bring their own theories and their own favorite remedies. The first and most constant treatment is the bleeding. After the initial, crude bleeding, they take a proper pint of blood from a vein in his right arm. A few hours later, they take another half pint from his left. They bleed him again and again, convinced that they are relieving the pressure on his brain, cooling the inflammatory humors that are causing his distress. Next comes the purging. The king is forced to swallow a series of powerful emetics and laxatives, designed to violently cleanse his body from both ends. He is given potions of antimony and salt of zinc to make him vomit. He is given enemas of rock salt and sacred bitters. The goal is to expel the poisons that are believed to be afflicting his system. Then, they attack his body from the outside. They shave his entire head, and to his bald scalp. They apply a great, sticky plaster of cantharide's powdered blister beetle, or Spanish fly, a powerful irritant designed to raise a huge, weeping blister. The theory is that this blister will act as a kind of chimney, drawing the evil humors and the poisons out of the king's brain. They apply these same blistering agents to his arms, his legs, his feet, until the king's body is a roadmap of painful, weeping sores. But these are just the standard treatments. The royal physicians, in their desperation to save the king, also resort to the most obscure, most expensive, and most bizarre remedies in their entire pharmacopoeia. You watch as the royal chemists in their laboratory prepare a special potion. Its primary ingredient is 40 drops of a liquid distilled from the matter of a human skull. It is a form of medicinal cannibalism, a belief that the essence of one man's soul can be used to strengthen another's. The king, who has apologized to his court for taking an unconscionable time a-dying, is forced to drink it. They force powders of precious pearl and of the legendary bezoar stone between his lips. They apply red-hot cauterizing irons to his skin, believing the intense pain will shock his system back to life. They force sneezing powders made of hellebore root up his nose, hoping to make him sneeze and thereby expel the evil humors from his head. This is the central, terrible debate of the medicine of your time. Are these doctors, who are inflicting this relentless, systematic torture on their patient, sadists? Are they fools? No. They are the most educated and respected scientists of their day. They are brave men, fighting desperately, with every weapon in their arsenal to save their king. They are simply operating within a scientific paradigm that is profoundly, fundamentally, and lethally wrong. They are men of a time when the violence of the cure was seen as a measure of its potency. While this physical battle is raging, a secret and politically explosive, spiritual battle is also being fought. The king is publicly the head of the Protestant Church of England, but he has long been suspected of having secret Catholic sympathies. His brother and his heir, James, is an open and unpopular Catholic. As the king weakens, you witness the quiet, frantic maneuvering of the Catholic faction at court. A secret backdoor passage is opened, and a Catholic priest, a man named Father Huddleston, who had once helped to save the king's life during his exile, is smuggled into the bedchamber. While the Protestant bishops are kept waiting outside, you watch as the dying King of England is secretly and treasonously received into the Roman Catholic Church and is given his last rites. After 4 days of this relentless medical assault, the king's body finally gives out. He has been bled, purged, blistered, cauterized, and poisoned with a dozen different strange and useless concoctions. On a Friday morning, he whispers his last. Famous words to his brother, making sure his many mistresses and his illegitimate children will be cared for. And then he dies. You stand in the crowded, stuffy, and silent royal bedchamber. The air is thick with the smell of burned flesh, of strange chemicals, of blood, and of death. You look at the tormented, blistered, and bloodless body of the merry monarch, and you know, with a quiet certainty, that he did not just die of a seizure, of a stroke, of a kidney failure. He was killed. He was killed by the best and most advanced medical care that the 17th century had to offer. He was killed by a committee of his own most learned and most well-intentioned physicians. You leave the dark, stifling, and deeply cynical world of the Restoration Court, with its dying kings and its bizarre, bloody cures. Your journey through time now takes you forward a century, into the Age of Enlightenment, a world that prides itself on reason, on art, on a new and refined sensibility. You are no longer in London, but in the great imperial and musical capital of Vienna. The year is 1791. Your world is not a world of politics and courtly intrigue. Your world is one of sublime, almost divine, harmony. It smells of reusen from violin bows, of the beeswax polish on a fine fortepiano, and of the cheap, black ink that you use to desperately capture the waterfall of musical ideas that flows from the mind of your master. You are a young composer, a student and a copyist for the man who is, though he is not yet universally acknowledged as such. The greatest musical genius of your age, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Your master is a small man, full of a nervous, almost frantic energy. His eyes are a piercing blue, and they seem to see a world that is different from your own, a world built of melody and of rhythm. He is a whirlwind of activity. He is composing brilliant new operas, like The Magic Flute. He is performing as a piano virtuoso. He is giving lessons. He is constantly, desperately, trying to earn enough money to keep up with his extravagant tastes and his growing debts. Your job is to keep up with him. It is an impossible and exhilarating task. He will compose an entire string quartet in his head while playing a game of billiards. And then he will dictate it to you, part by part. His voice humming the melodies, his fingers drumming the rhythms on the table. You are not just his student, you are his amanuensis, the scribe who must try to catch the lightning of his genius in a bottle of ink. In the autumn of that year, a new and strange commission arrives, a tall, gaunt, and deeply mysterious man, dressed from head to toe in gray, comes to your master's door. He is an anonymous messenger from an anonymous patron. He wishes to commission your master to compose a requiem mass, a great mass for the dead. He pays a handsome fee, and he promises another upon its completion. Your master, Mozart, accepts the commission, but the strange theatrical nature of the encounter deeply unsettles his already overworked and overwrought mind. He becomes obsessed with the requiem. He begins to speak of the gaunt, gray stranger not as a simple messenger, but as a figure from the afterlife, a harbinger of his own death. He develops the morbid, unshakable conviction that he is composing this great, tragic, and beautiful mass for the dead for his own funeral. And then, as if his dark premonition has summoned the illness itself, he falls sick. It begins after the premiere of one of his new operas. He complains of a headache, of a pain in his limbs. He develops a high fever. He takes to his bed. At first, you and his wife, Constance, are not overly alarmed. He has worked himself to the point of exhaustion. It is a simple fever. He will recover. But he does not recover. The sickness worsens. It is not a simple fever. It is a violent, systemic illness. His hands and his feet begin to swell, so much so that he cannot move. His body is racked with a deep, aching pain, a strange miliary rash. A rash of small, seed-like blisters appears on his skin. This is the severe miliary fever that his doctors will write on his death certificate. The best physicians in Vienna are summoned to his bedside. They are men of the Enlightenment, men of science, and they practice the science of their time. They diagnose his illness as an excess of the sanguine humor, a boiling of the blood, and they prescribe the standard, heroic, and utterly devastating cure. They begin to bleed him. You watch, helpless. As the doctors open a vein in your master's arm, draining away the blood from his already weakened body, he is too weak to protest. His wife, Constanza, is too terrified of the physician's authority to object. You see your master, the man who was a vessel of such sublime and delicate music, being subjected to this crude and violent medical ritual. Future medical historians will debate the true cause of Mozart's death for centuries. Was it acute rheumatic fever? An inflammatory disease that attacks the joints, the heart, and the kidneys? Was it a streptococcal infection, leading to kidney failure, was it? As the romantic and popular legend will always insist, a slow poisoning by his jealous rival, Antonio Salieri. You do not know. You only know that you are watching a great genius be consumed by a terrible sickness, and that the best efforts of the most learned doctors of your age seem only to be making him worse. But his mind, his brilliant, unconquerable mind, continues to work. The obsession with the Requiem now becomes his desperate race against death. He knows he is dying, and he is determined to finish his own funeral mass before he goes. His bed is moved into his study, and the room becomes a strange and tragic workshop. Your master is too weak to hold a pen, so he composes aloud. You and his other students and colleagues, including a young composer named Franz Xaver Süssmayr, gather around his bed. The scattered, unfinished pages of the Requiem are spread out on the blankets around him, and he begins to dictate. It is the most incredible and most heartbreaking creative act you will ever witness. His body is swollen and in agony, but his mind is a universe of pure, perfect sound. He sings the parts to you, his voice a weak, cracked whisper, but the melodies are sublime. He hums the bassoon lines. He imitates the sound of the trombones for the great, terrifying tuba mirum section. He gives you instructions on the harmony, on the orchestration, even on his deathbed. His primary concern is the proper voicing of the inner parts of a choral fugue. You and Süssmayr write with a frantic, desperate energy, your quills scratching on the paper, trying to capture the last notes of this dying god. The final section he works on is the Lacrimosa, the section that speaks of that day of tears and mourning. He sings the opening bars to you, a melody of such profound, transcendent, and heartbreaking sadness that it seems to be a direct translation of his own suffering into sound. He gets only 8 bars in, and then his strength fails him. He begins to weep for the first time, not for his own pain, but for his unfinished work. He dies on a cold, wet night in early December. His end is not a grand, dramatic affair. It is a quiet, almost mundane, passing. He is in his small, modest apartment, surrounded by his grieving wife, his 2 young sons, and a handful of his loyal, heartbroken students. The great divine light that was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is quietly, simply, and tragically extinguished. His death is followed by a final, and for future generations, an almost unbearable indignity. Mozart, the man who had been the toast of emperors and kings, the man whose music would become a cornerstone of Western civilization, has died in debt. His wife, Constanza, has no money for a grand funeral, and so he is given a third-class burial. It is the commonest, cheapest funeral the city provides. His body is taken from his home and is placed in a reusable coffin. A small, sad procession follows it in the rain to the St. Mark's Cemetery. Outside the city walls, a brief, perfunctory service is said, and then his body, taken from the coffin, is lowered, likely in a simple linen sack, into a common, unmarked, communal grave, a lime pit, along with a dozen other of the city's poor. There is no headstone, there is no monument. The precise location of his grave is not recorded. The greatest musical genius the world has ever known is buried like a pauper. His final resting place a mystery that will never be solved. You are left in the cold apartment, surrounded by the scattered, unfinished pages of his final, sublime masterpiece, the requiem that he was writing for himself. You and Süssmayr and the other students will do your best to complete it, to fill in the missing parts, to bring his final dying whispers to life. But you know, as you look at the last faint notes he ever wrote, that you have been a witness to a terrible, cosmic injustice. You have seen a man who was a vessel for the very voice of God be silenced, not by a grand, tragic fate, but by a common, squalid, and entirely preventable 18th century disease, and by the well-intentioned, but tragically ignorant doctors who tried to cure him. Your journey now leaves the world of kings and emperors, of grand courts and public, political deaths. You travel forward in time to a world that is quieter, more domestic, and, in its own way, more intimate. You are no longer a courtier or a general. You are a sister. And the great and famous person whose last days you are about to witness is a woman whose fame will only truly arrive long after she is gone. Your world is one of quiet country villages, of handwritten letters, of teacups, and of the sharp, brilliant, and often deeply funny mind of your beloved younger sister, Jane. The year's 1816. You are Cassandra Austen. You are the quiet, practical, and steady elder sister. Jane is the genius, and your bond, your deep and abiding love for each other, is the central and most important relationship in both of your lives. You live in a small, comfortable cottage in the village of Chawton. It is here, in this quiet, unassuming house, that Jane, in a remarkable burst of creative energy, has revised and published her first great novels. Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. She is, at this moment, at the absolute height of her creative powers. Her work is celebrated, though her identity as the author is a closely guarded secret, known only to your family and a few trusted friends. Her mind is a thing of wonder. It is sharp, satirical, and sees the world with a clarity that is often hilariously, and sometimes painfully, acute. Your greatest pleasure is to be her first reader, to listen as she reads a new chapter aloud in the evening, her voice alive with the wit of an Elizabeth Bennet, or the quiet suffering of an Eleanor Dashwood. It is in the spring of this year that the first, faint, and almost unnoticeable shadow falls upon your happy, domestic world. The illness begins not with a great, dramatic fever or a sudden collapse. It begins with a simple weariness. Jane, who has always been an energetic walker, begins to complain of a deep and persistent fatigue. She suffers from a pain in her back that makes it difficult for her to sit at her small writing desk for long periods. You and the rest of your family, are not overly concerned. She has been working too hard. She is exhausted. She simply needs rest. But the rest does not cure her. The illness progresses with a slow, insidious, and baffling creep. She develops new and strange symptoms. She suffers from terrible bouts of nausea and bilious attacks. And you notice a strange change in her complexion. Her famously bright, clear skin begins to take on a mottled, discolored, almost tanned appearance. A strange, blotchy pigmentation that you have never seen before. You and your family are now truly alarmed. You summon the local apothecary. He is a good man, but he is baffled. He prescribes the usual remedies for a general constitutional weakness, strengthening tonics of iron and bark. A nourishing diet. The remedies do nothing, as her weakness worsens. She is forced to give up her long walks. She now spends most of her days resting on a sofa that you have arranged for her, made of 3 chairs pushed together. But her mind, her brilliant, unconquerable mind, does not rest. She continues to write. She is working on a new novel, the one that will one day be called Persuasion, when she is too weak to hold the pen herself. She dictates the words to you. You, her beloved sister, become the scribe for her final masterpiece. Her famous wit does not desert her. Her letters from this time, which you will treasure for the rest of your life, are still full of her sharp, ironic humor. She writes to her nephew about her condition, dismissing her own suffering with a joke. She writes, suffering from a case of bile, but that she finds it to be a very genteel, portable, and gentlemanlike sort of illness, in a desperate search for a cure. You and your family try the fashionable medical treatments of your day. You take her to the seaside resort of Cheltenham, for the prevailing medical wisdom holds that the fresh sea air and the practice of sea bathing are powerful remedies for all manner of constitutional ailments. She endures the cold, miserable, and useless ritual of being dipped in the English Channel. But it does not help. She jokes in a letter that if she is to die, she would prefer not to be cold and damp at the same time. By the spring of 1817, she is so weak that she can no longer walk unaided. A final, desperate decision is made. You and she will travel to the nearby city of Winchester to place her under the care of a more experienced surgeon. The journey, a slow trip by carriage, is an agony for her, but she endures it with her usual quiet fortitude. You take lodgings in a small, quiet house near Winchester Cathedral, and you become what you have always been your sister's nurse, her confidant, her constant companion. The Winchester surgeon is kind, but he is as helpless as all the others. He has no name for her strange, wasting illness. He has no cure. He can only offer laudanum for the pain, and the useless advice to rest and to maintain a nourishing diet. Her diet now consists of a thrilling rotation of water gruel and mutton broth. She writes to her nephew that she is discovering the joys of a liquid diet, a joy she could have happily lived without. Her body is failing, but her mind remains as sharp and as clear as ever. She continues to write, composing a funny, light-hearted poem about the St. Swithin's Day, races at Winchester, even on her deathbed. She is more interested in the absurdities of the social world than in her own tragic symptoms. The great unanswered question, the one that will become a famous literary and medical mystery, is what is actually killing her. The doctors of her time were baffled, and for 200 years, the debate will continue. Modern medical historians, analyzing the detailed descriptions of her symptoms from her own and your letters, will propose a dozen different retrospective diagnoses. Was it Addison's disease, a rare failure of the adrenal glands, which would explain the weakness and the strange skin discoloration? Was it Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system? Was it bovine tuberculosis, contracted from drinking unpasteurized milk? Or was it something else entirely? The mystery will never be definitively solved. You, her sister, do not care about the name of the disease. You only care about the suffering of the person you love most in the world. The end comes in the quiet. Early morning hours of July 18th. She has been in a great deal of pain. You are with her, holding her. She knows she is dying. You ask her if there is anything she wants. "I want nothing but death," she whispers. Her last recorded words, a few hours later, she dies quietly and peacefully in your arms. You are left alone in the quiet lodgings in Winchester, with the still, silent body of your sister, and you are left with her legacy, the unpublished manuscripts of Persuasion and Northanger Abbey. You have been the loyal and loving witness to the slow, quiet, and mysterious extinguishing of one of the greatest and most beloved lights in all of English literature. She was not taken by a great, dramatic plague or a violent fever. She was consumed by a quiet, creeping, and anonymous disease that the best medical science of her day could not even name. You will see her buried in the great cathedral at Winchester, an honor granted to her because of your family's clerical connections. And you will be the one who, for the rest of your own long life, will guard her memory, her letters, and her unpublished works. You have lost your sister, but you have been given a new and sacred duty to make sure that the world will one day know the full measure of her genius. You leave the quiet, domestic world of Regency England, a world of teacups and of sorrows that are as muted as the watercolor landscapes. Your journey now takes you forward a few years, into the heart of the Romantic era, a world of passionate rebellion, of heroic gestures, and of a new kind of celebrity, the poet, as a superstar. The year is 1824. You are not a sister or a courtier. You are a man of science, a young, newly graduated Italian physician named Dr. Francesco Bruno. And you have just landed the most exciting, most prestigious, and most terrifying job of your young career. You have been hired as the personal physician to the most famous, most scandalous, and most brilliant man in all of Europe, the great poet. Lord Byron, your new master is not a reclusive author. He is a force of nature, a man whose life is a grand, theatrical performance, and he has embarked on his final and most heroic act. He has come to Greece, to the miserable, swampy, and strategically important town of Missolonghi, to offer his fortune and his sword to the cause of the Greek War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire. Your world is now a military camp. It smells of mud, of gunpowder, and of the brackish, stagnant water of the lagoon that surrounds the town. It is a world of chaotic, undisciplined, and fiercely brave Greek rebels, and of your own small, increasingly frustrated English entourage. Your patient, Lord Byron, is not an easy man to care for. He is brilliant, he is generous, he is brave. He is also moody, arrogant, and has a deep and profound distrust of all physicians. He is a man who believes in the power of his own will over the frailties of his own body. He throws himself into the work of organizing the rebellion, ignoring the terrible, unhealthy conditions of the town, a place that is a notorious breeding ground for malarial fevers. Your story begins in April, after a long ride in a torrential, chilling rainstorm. Lord Byron returns to his quarters drenched and shivering. That evening, he complains of a severe headache and pains in his limbs. By the next morning, he is in the grip of a violent, raging fever. You, his personal physician, are immediately at his side. You are a young doctor, but you are a man of the new, more modern school of medicine. You have read the new theories coming out of the great medical schools of Paris. You believe in a cautious, supportive approach. You diagnose a severe rheumatic fever. You prescribe rest. You advise warm blankets. And you prepare a dose of Peruvian bark quinine, the only effective anti-fever drug you possess. But you are not the only physician in Missolonghi. The other great leaders of the Greek rebellion have their own doctors. Two older, more experienced, and far more conservative physicians named Dr. Millingen and Dr. von der Heyden. They are summoned for a consultation, and with their arrival, your master's sickbed becomes a medical battleground. They listen to your diagnosis and your proposed treatment with a barely concealed contempt. They are men of the old school, the school of heroic medicine. They see your gentle, supportive methods as a form of cowardly inaction. They see the high fever, the inflamed body of your patient, and they see only one thing of violent excess of the blood, a plethora. That must be immediately and aggressively drained. They insist on a bleeding. Lord Byron himself, lying in his bed, weak with fever but his mind still sharp and cynical, argues with them. He famously distrusts doctors, and he has a particular horror of being bled. "You are a damn set of butchers," he tells them. His voice a hoarse croak, but the two older doctors are relentless. They are the experts. They are the voice of established medical authority. They tell him that to refuse a bleeding in his condition is a death sentence. They speak of the inflammation of the brain that will surely follow if the pressure of the hot blood is not relieved. You argue against them. You tell them that the patient is already weak, that to drain his blood will only weaken him further. But you are a young, unknown, foreign doctor. They are the respected. Senior physicians. The debate rages around your patient's bed. It is a medical civil war, and it is a war that you are destined to lose. Finally, Byron, exhausted by the fever and by the endless, hectoring arguments of his doctors, gives in. "Come on," he says with a weary, fatalistic sigh. "Do what you will. There is less danger in the lancet than in the name of it." It is a surrender. He has placed his life in their hands, and you are forced to become a helpless, horrified accomplice in what you are certain is his medical assassination. You watch as Dr. Milligan takes out his lancet. You watch as he opens a vein in your master's arm. The blood flows, dark and thick, into a brass bowl. They take a full pound of blood. A massive amount. Lord Byron immediately feels faint. His condition visibly worsened. But the fever, of course, does not break. The next day, he is weaker, more delirious. And the doctor's conclusion is the same. Terrible. Circular logic you have witnessed in your other lives. The cure has not failed. The dose was simply not large enough. They must bleed him again. They apply a dozen leeches to his temples, leaving him with a ring of bleeding, weeping wounds on his head. The next day, they bleed him again from the arm. He is now so weak he can barely speak. He has been subjected to a massive systematic exsanguination. The original fever, which may have been survivable, has been compounded by a new and far more deadly disease, the cure itself. This is the great, tragic debate that his death will inspire. Did Lord Byron, the great romantic hero, die of a fever in a Greek swamp? Or was he killed by his own doctors? You, the man who was in the room, know the truth on the evening of the 10th day of his illness. Lord Byron, the great poet, the hero of the Romantic Age, lies dying. He is a shadow of his former self, his body drained of its blood, his mind lost in a delirium. His last muttered words are a confused jumble of the names of his estranged wife, his beloved daughter, and of Greece. And then he is gone. You stand in the small, miserable room in the swampy, forgotten town of Missolonghi. The great, bright, and fiery spirit of your age has been extinguished. Not on a glorious battlefield, not by a heroic sacrifice for the cause of liberty. He has been killed, slowly, systematically, and with the best of intentions. By a committee of his own doctors. You look at your own hands. You are a physician. You have taken an oath to do no harm, and you have just stood by and watched as your colleagues, in the name of a flawed and deadly science, have bled a man to death. The feeling of impotence, of guilt, and of a profound, bottomless disillusionment with your own profession is a thing that will haunt you for the rest of your life. You leave the swampy, miserable town of Missolonghi, a place that will now be forever famous as the tomb of a great poet, killed not by a heroic battle, but by the misguided theories of his own physicians. Your journey now takes you forward a few years, into the very heart of the Romantic Age. A world that is obsessed with passionate art, with intense emotion, and with the idea of the suffering genius. The year is 1849. You are in Paris, the glittering, intellectual, and artistic capital of Europe. You are not a doctor or a soldier. You are an artist, a painter, a man whose life is a conversation with color and with light. Your name is Eugène Delacroix, and your closest and most treasured friend is a man who is the living embodiment of the suffering genius, the Polish composer and pianist, Frédéric Chopin. Your world is the world of the Parisian salons, the dimly lit, velvet-draped rooms where the great artists, writers, and musicians of your time gather to exchange ideas, to argue, and to perform their latest works. And in this world, your friend, Frederick, is a kind of god. He is a small, frail, and almost ethereally elegant man. But when he sits at the piano, his delicate hands produce a music of such breathtaking power, such profound passion, such heartbreaking sadness, that it seems to come from another world. But you know the secret that is the source of both his genius and his tragedy? Your friend has been dying for his entire adult life. He is afflicted with the great romantic disease of your age, consumption, tuberculosis. In your time, consumption is not just a disease, it is a cultural phenomenon. It is seen as a sign of a sensitive, artistic, and passionate soul. The slow, wasting decline, the pale skin, the fever-bright eyes. These are considered marks of a tragic and almost beautiful destiny. The disease is thought to burn away the coarse, earthly parts of a person, leaving only the pure, refined spirit. It is a deeply romantic and almost entirely false idea. You, his closest friend, have seen the reality of the disease up close, and you know that it is not romantic, it is not beautiful, it is a miserable, squalid, and deeply unglamorous process of slow-motion suffocation. You have seen him through the years of his long decline. You have seen the constant, racking cough that leaves him breathless. You have seen the night sweats that soak his bed linens. You have seen him, after a fit of coughing, discreetly spit a small, terrifyingly bright speck of blood into his handkerchief. Now, in his final months, he is living in an elegant, expensive apartment at number 12, Place Vendôme. But the apartment is not a home. It is a sick room. The great Pleyel piano that dominates the drawing room now sits mostly silent, its lid closed, a dark, funereal monument to a music that can no longer be played. You visit him every day. You are part of the small, loyal circle of friends, students, and his devoted older sister, Ludwika, who have formed a kind of protective wall around him in his final decline. You watch as he fades. He is now a ghost of a man, a skeletal figure lost in a great, canopied bed. He is too weak to walk, too weak to sit up for more than a few minutes at a time. His life has shrunk to the four walls of this room. The best physicians in Paris attend to him. They are helpless. Of course, the medicine of your time has no cure for consumption. They prescribe the usual useless remedies, a strengthening diet of beef broth and jellied calf's foot, which your friend, a man of exquisitely refined taste, looks at with an expression of pure, artistic horror. They prescribe opium-based cough syrups, which do nothing to stop the disease, but which at least dull the pain and the constant, agonizing urge to cough. They advise good air, the great vague cure-all of your age. His life is now a constant, exhausting battle for breath. But his mind, his brilliant, musical mind, is as sharp as ever. He cannot compose, he cannot play, but he can still hear the music in his head. He will talk to you. His voice a low, breathy whisper, not about his suffering, but about the structure of a Bach fugue, or the tone of a new kind of piano. As you sit by his bedside, you are at the very heart of the great romantic debate. Is great art born from great suffering? Does a man need to be a tragic, tormented soul in order to create work of profound and lasting beauty? You look at your frail, dying friend, the man who has produced some of the most sublime and heart-wrenching music ever written. And you wonder, is his genius a product of his disease, or is his disease a tragic, senseless thief that is robbing the world of the music he still has left to write? You see the truth. You think. The suffering does not create the art. The art is a separate, divine thing. The suffering is just a miserable, physical reality that is silencing it. There is no romance in this slow, wasting death. There is only loss. In his final days, his mind begins to drift. He is visited by a stream of friends, of admirers. The Polish émigré community of Paris comes to pay their last respects to their great national hero. His salon, once a place of brilliant music, is now a place of hushed, sorrowful whispers. He is so weak that he sometimes finds the presence of so many well-meaning people to be an exhausting burden. "If I love you," he whispers to a friend, "let me die in peace, being a beloved." Dying geniuses, it turns out, a very tiring business. The end comes in the early hours of a cold October morning. You are there, in the room, with his sister Ludwika and a few other close friends. He is lucid. He knows he is dying. He is a devout Catholic, and he has made his peace with God. He has one final musical request. He asked that at his funeral. They perform the requiem of the only composer he ever considered his equal, Mozart. Then, as the dawn is breaking, he is seized by a final, terrible fit of coughing. He struggles for breath. And then, he is still. The silence in the room is absolute. The great, poetic, and passionate voice of Frédéric Chopin has been extinguished. You look at the still, peaceful face of your friend, and you are overwhelmed by the profound sense of loss. But you are also struck by the quiet, mundane reality of his end. The great romantic hero has died not in a duel, not in a passionate frenzy, but in a bed, from a common, squalid and chronic disease of the lungs. His funeral is a grand affair, held at the great church of the Madeleine, as he requested. Mozart's Requiem is performed, the sublime and terrible music a fitting tribute to his own genius. All of the artistic and high society of Paris is there to mourn him, but it is a small, obscure, and deeply strange detail that will, for you, be the most powerful and lasting memory of your friend's death. Before his body is buried, his sister, Ludwika, in accordance with his dying wish, has his heart removed. She preserves it in a jar of what you are told is cognac, and she smuggles it. This last, precious, and physical piece of her brother, back to their beloved and unfree homeland of Poland. His body will be buried in Paris, but his heart, she is determined, will rest in the soil of the nation that he loved and that he immortalized in his music. You are left in a world that is quieter, a world that has been robbed of its greatest musical poet, and you have learned the great. Terrible lesson of the Romantic Age, the popular image of the consumptive genius, of the beautiful, tragic artist who is consumed by the fire of his own passion, is a lie. The reality is just a man in a room, his body wasted, his lungs failing, slowly, miserably, and unromantically, drowning in his own blood. You leave the candle lit. Bohemian world of 19th century Paris, a world of artistic passion and of the slow, romantic, and miserable decay of consumption. Your journey now takes you to the very center of global power, to the heart of an empire that is confident, prosperous, and at the absolute zenith of its influence. You are in England in the year 1861. Your world is not a salon or a studio. Your world is a palace. A great and complex machine of statecraft and of empire. You are not a friend or a lover of a great artist. You are the queen. You are Victoria, the ruler of the United Kingdom and of a vast global empire upon which the sun never sets. Your life is one of immense public duty and of profound, almost overwhelming, private devotion for the center of your universe, the anchor of your life, the man who is not just your husband, but your chief advisor, your private secretary, your partner in the great and lonely business of ruling, is your beloved Prince Albert. He is a man of brilliant intellect, of tireless energy, of a deep and serious sense of purpose. He is the man who organized the Great Exhibition, a magnificent festival of industry and progress. He is a reformer, a modernizer, a man who believes in science and in reason. He is the steady, rational, and calming influence that balances your own passionate and sometimes volatile nature. Your love for him is a thing of legend. Your reliance upon him is absolute. It is the late autumn of 1861 at Windsor Castle. The world is a place of anxieties. There is a diplomatic crisis brewing with the United States, the Trent affair. That threatens to bring your two nations to war, but your greatest anxiety is a more personal one. Your husband, Albert, is unwell. It begins as a thing of nothing, a simple malaise. He complains of insomnia, of pains in his body, of a general and persistent weariness. You are worried, but the royal physicians, the most eminent and respected doctors in the land, are not. They examine the prince consort. They diagnose him with a simple influenza, a case of overwork and exposure to the damp English weather. They prescribe rest and a nourishing diet of beef tea and broths, but Albert does not get better. He gets worse. The weariness deepens into a profound weakness. He can no longer attend to his endless stacks of state papers. He develops a persistent, low-grade fever. He has no appetite. You watch him with a growing, cold, and sickening dread, as the strength seems to visibly drain out of him. Day by day, the royal physicians continue to reassure you. It is a stubborn fever. They say it will run its course. They are confident. Their optimism, you begin to feel, is a kind of professional duty, a refusal to alarm the queen, a denial of the terrible truth that is beginning to dawn in your own heart. This was a great debate of 19th century medicine, especially when dealing with a royal patient. Were the doctors who attended to your husband simply incompetent, failing to make a diagnosis that a common country doctor might have made, or were they paralyzed by the immense pressure of their position? So terrified of causing you, the queen, any distress, that they engaged in a kind of fatal, reassuring optimism, refusing to speak the name of a truly dangerous disease until it was far, far too late. You, the queen of the most powerful empire on earth, are now a simple, terrified wife, watching the man you love fade away before your eyes. You are helpless. You are surrounded by the best doctors in the world, and they can do nothing. You are the ruler of a quarter of the globe, and you cannot command your own husband's fever to break. The disease is, you will later learn, almost certainly typhoid fever. It is a bacterial infection, spread by contaminated food or water, and its source was likely the very palace in which you are living. Windsor Castle, for all its grandeur, is an ancient building, and its drainage and sewer systems are notoriously unsanitary. A medieval relic in an industrial age. Your beloved Albert, the great champion of science and modern sanitation, has likely been poisoned by his own royal plumbing by early December. His condition has worsened dramatically. The low-grade fever has become a high, raging one. His mind, once so clear and so rational, begins to wander, he is in a state of delirium, muttering in his native German. Speaking of the forests of his childhood, you sit by his bedside in the grand, gloomy, and heavily curtained blue room at Windsor Castle, and you watch your entire world collapse. You read to him, you bathe his forehead in his brief moments of lucidity. He recognizes you. He holds your hand. He calls you by his pet name for you. Gutes Frauchen. Good little wife. These small moments of recognition are islands of heartbreaking clarity in a great, rising ocean of feverish confusion. Your children are summoned. You all gather around his bed. A royal family united in a common, helpless grief. The physicians now know the truth. They finally admit to you that it is typhoid fever, that the situation is grave, but it is too late for their diagnosis to be of any use. There is no cure. He continues to weaken. The days are a long, slow, and agonizing vigil. You are the queen, and you must still attend to the business of the state. You receive your ministers, you read your state papers, and then you return to the sick room, to your own, private, and all-consuming duty as a wife. The end comes on a cold, rainy Saturday, the 14th of December. Albert is calm, his delirium having passed, replaced by a profound and final weakness. You kneel at his bedside, holding his cold hand in yours. Your children are gathered around you. He looks at you, and you are sure that he knows you. He whispers a few, faint and indistinct words. And then, at a few minutes before 11 o'clock at night, he simply stops breathing. The silence in the room is absolute. A silence that you know, in that instant, will fill the rest of your life. The Prime Minister, who is waiting outside, is informed. The telegraph is used to send the terrible news to the rest of the country, to the rest of the world. Prince Albert, the Prince Consort, is dead. He was 42 years old. You are no longer a wife. You are a widow. The light of your life. The man you called your angel, your king, has been extinguished, not by an assassin's bullet, not by a grand political tragedy, but by a common, filthy, and entirely preventable disease. A sickness that was bred in the very foundations of your own magnificent royal castle. Your grief is a thing of awesome, terrible, and world-changing power. It is a grief that will not be private. You will make it the business of the entire nation, of the entire empire. You retreat from the world. You swathe yourself and your court in black. You become the great, iconic, and perpetual mourner, the widow of Windsor. The death of this one man, from this one common, miserable fever, will change the course of your reign and of your country's history. The great, confident, and forward-looking spirit of the early Victorian age seems to die with him. Your long, self-imposed seclusion will change the very nature of the monarchy. You have been a witness to the ultimate lesson in the helplessness of power. You are the Queen Empress, the ruler of hundreds of millions of people, and you could do nothing to save the one life that mattered to you. You have learned, with a final and brutal clarity, that the microscopic tyrants of the world, the germs and the fevers, do not recognize crowns or scepters. In the sick room, even a queen is just a helpless, grieving woman. Your journey through the history of the great and the dying now takes you to its final destination. You leave the gaslit, grief-stricken halls of Windsor Castle and travel forward in time, and back across the Atlantic, to a new and confident world. It is the age of industry, of invention, of the telegraph and the steam locomotive. It is the American Gilded Age. The year is 1881. You are not a courtier or a general. You are a man of the new science, a young, recently trained physician in the capital city of Washington, D.C. You have studied in the great universities of Europe. You have read the revolutionary work of Pasteur on germs and of Lister on antiseptic surgery. You are a modern doctor, and you believe in a new and powerful Trinity soap, water, and carbolic acid. Your story begins on a hot, sticky July morning at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station. The President of the United States, a former Civil War general and brilliant scholar named James A. Garfield, is here, preparing to leave for a summer holiday. The station is crowded with well-wishers, and then 2 gunshots crack through the air. The president cries out and collapses. A disgruntled and mentally unstable office seeker named Charles Guiteau has just shot the president in the back. You are one of the first physicians to rush to the scene. The president is conscious, but he is in a state of shock. He is carried to a room in the station, and the most powerful and respected surgeons in the capital are immediately summoned. And in that moment, the President of the United States, a man who has survived the Battle of Shiloh, is delivered into the hands of a medical science that is caught in a terrible, violent, and ultimately fatal civil war with itself. The lead physician who takes charge is a man named, with a terrible and unforgettable irony, Dr. Willard Bliss. He is the most respected surgeon in Washington. He is an old Army doctor, a man of immense experience, and of an equally immense and unshakable pride. And he is a man who does not believe in the new, fanciful germ theory coming out of Europe. He believes, as he was taught, that a surgeon's greatest assets are speed, confidence, and a good old, blood-stained apron that speaks of his experience. You watch, with a growing sense of horrified disbelief. As the tragedy unfolds, the bullet wound itself, you can see, is not immediately fatal. The bullet is lodged somewhere deep inside the president's body, but it has not hit a major organ or artery. With the sterile, careful medicine you have been taught, the wound is almost certainly survivable. But Dr. Bliss and the dozen other eminent surgeons who now crowd the room are not interested in sterile, careful medicine. They are interested in one thing, and one thing only: finding the bullet. And so begins the probing. Dr. Bliss, with his unwashed hands, inserts his finger deep into the wound, trying to feel the location of the bullet. He cannot find it. Another surgeon tries, then another. Soon, a dozen of the country's most famous doctors have all had their unsterilized fingers inside the President of the United States. When their fingers fail, they turn to their instruments. They begin to probe the wound with long, metal surgical probes, which they have not bothered to clean with anything more than a wipe on their frock coat. They are desperately, blindly, and filthily searching for the bullet. You, a young doctor trained in the new Listerian antiseptic methods, are a powerless and horrified witness. You tentatively suggest, at one point, that perhaps the wound should be cleaned with a carbolic solution, that the probes should be sterilized. Dr. Bliss looks at you with a withering contempt, as if you have just suggested consulting a witch doctor. "We are surgeons, sir," he says, his voice dripping with scorn. "Not chemists. We are here to remove the bullet, not to dabble in Mr. Lister's foreign foolishness. This is the great and tragic medical debate of your time. The germ theory has been proven in the laboratories of Europe, but it has not yet been accepted in the operating theaters of America, the pride of the old guard of surgeons. Their belief in their own experience and their own established methods is a wall that the new science has not yet been able to breach. President Garfield is about to become the most famous and most tragic victim of that wall. The days that follow become a long, slow, and public death watch. The president is moved to the White House. He is burning with a fever. The wound is now massively infected, the pus pouring from it, but Dr. Bliss and his team continue their daily, agonizing, and infectious probing, still hunting for the elusive bullet. The entire nation is gripped by the drama. The newspapers publish daily and often wildly optimistic. Bulletins from the doctors, The public prays for their president. Inventors from all over the country descend on Washington with strange and wonderful new devices to help. Even Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, arrives with a new machine he has invented, a kind of primitive metal detector, which he hopes will be able to locate the bullet. He tries his machine on the president, but it fails. Likely because no one realized that the president was lying on a new kind of mattress that was filled with steel coils, which interfered with the device. The long, hot, and miserable summer of 1881 grinds on. The president is not dying from a gunshot wound. He is dying of sepsis, of a massive body-wide infection, a blood poisoning that has been directly and systematically introduced into his body by his own doctors. Finally, in a last, desperate attempt to save him, the doctors decide that the foul, swampy air of a Washington summer is to blame. They believe that if they can just get him to the clean, fresh, health-giving air of the seaside, he might recover. A special railway line is laid directly to the door of a seaside cottage in the town of Elberon, New Jersey. The dying president is carefully moved, a nation watching with a bated breath. But the fresh sea air cannot cure a body that is riddled with abscesses and consumed by a raging infection. After 80 long and agonizing days, President James A. Garfield, his body wasted to a mere skeleton, finally dies. The nation is plunged into mourning. The assassin, Charles Guiteau, is reviled as the man who has killed the president. But you, the young doctor who was there on that first terrible day, you know the truth. You know that Guiteau only fired the gun. It was the doctors, with their unwashed hands and their arrogant, ignorant pride, who made the wound a fatal one. The president is not a martyr of a political assassination. He is a martyr of medical malpractice. His death is not in vain. However, the sheer public and undeniable horror of his long, slow, and well-documented decline is a shock to the American public and to the American medical establishment. The debate is no longer an academic one. The failure of the old ways has been laid bare for all to see. The death of President Garfield is the great, tragic event that finally, after decades of resistance, breaks the back of the old, pre-antiseptic surgery. His death will, in the end, save the lives of countless other patients. You are left in a nation in mourning. A young doctor at the dawn of a new and cleaner age, and you have learned the final, and most disturbing lesson of your long journey through the history of medical misery. You have learned that sometimes the most famous and respected experts can be the most dangerously and most catastrophically wrong, and that a man can be killed not just by the disease, but by the very cure that is supposed to save him. The story of the president's long, slow, and entirely preventable death is the final, tragic chapter in our journey tonight. The image of the great doctors, with their unwashed hands and their fatal confidence, is a chilling reminder of how far our understanding of medicine has come. Let the memory of that sad, stuffy sick room in the White House now fade, replaced by the quiet, clean, and peaceful atmosphere of the present moment. The story is over. The lesson is learned. It is time to rest. Your own world is a safe one. It is a world that has been built on the hard-won knowledge that came from these very tragedies. You are surrounded by a quiet, invisible, and life-giving science. Feel the peace of that world settle over you now. A soft and comforting blanket. Your breathing is slow and even. The cares of the day, the ghosts of history, begin to drift away on the easy tide of your exhalations. Your mind grows quiet. Your body grows heavy, sinking into a state of deep and profound relaxation. The darkness behind your eyelids is a calm and welcoming space. A sanctuary where there are no more stories, no more sorrows. There is nothing required of you now but to let go, to release the day, to surrender to the gentle, inevitable pull of sleep. Drift now on the quiet. silent waters of the night, toward a place of deep and calm and healing rest